Coming up next, we're counting down the 5 best debut albums of the 70s. I always said the 70s are the best decade for albums. Well, these are records that reshaped the sound of everything after. Each one of these is a game changer. They were instant classics when they came out. One turned a group of barroom brawlers into the king of Southern swagger. Another introduced the world to a terrifying new sound, laid the foundation for the genre that millions of mothers would ban from their homes. Another album was recorded in a basement, and it turned out to be one of the best-selling debut albums ever. And another redefined what was possible on guitar, leaving listeners' jaws on the floor. This guy even wrote a parody song making fun of punk, and it ended up as one of the heaviest riffs ever. Each of these started a revolution in their own way. These records didn't just introduce bands, they changed rock and roll forever. So stick around, we're going to count them down, coming up on Professor of Rock. Hey music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time, especially today. If you remember this commercial, clap on, clap off, clap on, clap. You're going to do this channel of deep musical nostalgia. Make sure to subscribe below right now, click the white button and click the bell. Also, make sure to go to professorofrock.com, our 24-hour music channel. Sign up there, we have some special stuff coming up there. You know, there's something special about a debut album. The first statement from a band, when they had everything to prove and nothing to lose. Back in the 70s, rock music was moving fast. Genres were splintering, new sounds were emerging, competition was fierce. Some debuts came and went, but today's bands, they rewrote the rules. For this episode, we got 5 70s debut albums that didn't just launch careers, they shaped the future of rock. Let's get into it. At the number 5 spot, I've got the Kings of the South, baby. We're talking Lynyrd Skynyrd with pronounced Lynyrd Skynyrd. What can you say about this band? They're the definitive Southern rock band, and there's just no argument about it. They blended blues, country, and hard rock into a sound that was unmistakably their very own. They had all the swagger of a hard-living bar band, but beneath their freewheeling image was a group of musicians with some serious chops. And a front man who could write lyrics sharper than a Bowie knife. Ronnie Van Zant had an uncanny ability to capture everyday struggles with an honesty that felt like down-home country storytelling. Skynyrd's origins stretched back to Jacksonville, Florida in the late 60s, where Ronnie and guitarist Alan Collins and Gary Rosington formed My Backyard. They later added bassist Leon Wilkeson, and then guitarist Ed King, keyboardist Billy Powell, and drummer Bob Burns. The band changed their name to Lynyrd Skynyrd as a mocking nod to a nerdy teacher, Lynyrd Skynyrd, their high school gym teacher, who enforced a no long hair policy. And after years of grinding it out in bars and clubs across the South, finally got their big break. That came in 72 when producer Al Cooper saw them play at an Atlanta dive bar. The dive bar was called Fanuccio's. Cooper knew that they were something special, and the moment he heard Van Zant's voice cut through the smoke-filled club, he knew he had something. Now, Lynyrd Skynyrd was rough around the edges for sure, but undeniably real. Cooper had just launched Sounds of the South, a subsidiary of MCA Records, and he signed these guys on the spot. He knew that they were going to be big. In 1973, Skynyrd entered Studio One in Doraville, Georgia to record their debut album. Cooper's production gave the album a raw but polished sound, and that was tough to do. He balanced the band's barroom sound with tight, radio-ready arrangements. But it was their triple guitar attack that really set this band apart from everybody else. Rosington, Collins, and King, they all played off each other with razor-sharp precision. And the result was one of the greatest Southern rock albums of all time, one of the greatest debuts ever. Top to bottom, the record contains 8 powerhouse tracks. Now, side 1 kicks off with the bluesy I Ain't the One with a killer groove that sets the tone for what's to come. It's just what you want in an opener. Then comes Tuesday's Gone, one of the most poignant and melancholy ballads of the entire 70s. Carried by these achingly beautiful guitar lines designed to break your heart every single time. Now the pace picks back up with Gimme 3 Steps, a honky-tonk tell about getting chased out of a bar at gunpoint. Pure Skynyrd storytelling at its best, I must say. This one really happened when an 18-year-old Ronnie Van Zant sported a fake ID to get in a bar while his younger bandmates, Rosington and Collins, waited for him in the truck. Van Zant danced with a girl named Linda, whose boyfriend was pissed off. I don't think he knew. He walked up to Van Zant and reached for something in his boot. Now, figuring that he was going for a gun, Van Zant said, and I quote, "If you're going to shoot me, it's going to be in the ass or the elbows. Just give me a few steps and I'll be gone." He bolted for the truck, and he and his bandmates wrote the song that very night.
3 steps towards the door. Give me 3 steps.
Then closing out the first side, Simple Man serves up a soulful slice of common sense wisdom. What a great song, man. Ronnie's grandmother and Gary Rosington's mother had both just passed away. One day when the two were together sharing stories about them, they wrote this song as the advice that the women had given them in their lives, delivered in all sincerity.
Don't live too fast.
Now, the second side includes lesser-known gems, things going on.
They better make some changes and do it soon.
Mississippi Kid, a Delta blues-infused number.
I was born in Mississippi, baby.
And a Poison Whiskey, that was a cautionary tale wrapped in kind of a boogie-woogie groove. Even the deep cuts had undeniable personality coming from Skynyrd. And of course, there's the granddaddy of them all, the ultimate closer, maybe the greatest closer ever, Freebird, Lynyrd Skynyrd's undisputed masterpiece. The 9-minute epic. Now, this was split into 2 halves, the first featuring Van Zant's heartfelt farewell lyrics.
If I leave here tomorrow.
And the second is an explosive guitar solo that helped lay the foundation of arena rock. Guitarist Gary Rosington once described it simply. He said, "It wasn't anything heavy, just a love song about leaving town." But man, Freebird became so much more than that, as you know. Their answer to Stairway to Heaven, a southern rock anthem for the ages, the one that everyone requests from every band on any given night, really. Now, released on August 13, 1973, pronounced Lynyrd Skynyrd, wasn't an instant blockbuster, actually. It steadily built momentum, though, peaked at number 27 on the Billboard 200. The album's impact grew over time, though, especially after Freebird was released as a live single in 75, climbing to number 19 on the Hot 100.
Oh, Freebird, yeah.
The album's other singles, Give Me 3 Steps and Simple Man, didn't even chart, but both became classic rock radio staples we listen to every day. So really, at the time, the record had no hits, but it still broke through to the masses. All right, moving on to my number 4 pick for the best debut albums of the 70s. I got Black Sabbath with Black Sabbath.
Figure in black.
The opening notes of Black Sabbath, that ominous, thunderous tritone riff, the distant toll of a bell, the slow creeping dead, it changed rock music forever, right? Before 1970, no band had ever sounded so menacing. I mean, sure, Led Zeppelin had, heaviness, and Cream had cranked up the volume, but this was something totally different. It was slower, darker, and utterly foreboding. The moment that Ozzy Osbourne howls, "What is this that stands before me?" it's game over. A new genre is born. Heavy metal.
That stands before me.
The one that irritated millions of mothers across the world and was instantly banned from homes across the globe, starting with the whole, satanic panic movement, really. Black Sabbath didn't just push boundaries, it obliterated them. This was music for the outcasts, the misfits, the kids who didn't fit in with the flower power movement at the time. Instead of singing about enlightenment, peace and love, Sabbath delivered tales of darkness and despair and really the supernatural. It was a complete rejection of the idealism of the 60s. really a musical exorcism.
No, please, no.
The band itself, forged in working class grit. Guitarist Tony Iommi, bassist Geezer Butler, drummer Bill Ward, and frontman Ozzy Osbourne grew up in the factories and steel mills of Birmingham, where opportunities were scarce and the future looked really grim. Originally playing under the name Polka Tulk, if you can believe that. Then they were Earth, and they quickly realized that their blues-based rock sound wasn't standing out really. But after Butler wrote a song called Black Sabbath, something just clicked. The song's creepy, evil-sounding riff, inspired by Gustav Holst's Mars the Bringer of War, became the blueprint for heavy metal. Realizing they were onto something, they adopted the name Black Sabbath and leaned into the dark, ominous atmosphere that would define them for years. In the moment, like I said, of hippie flower children, Black Sabbath, they aimed to scare the hell out of people. And they did just that. Their self-titled debut album was recorded in just one day, October 16, 1969, at Regent Sound Studios in London. The entire album was tracked live with minimal overdubs. Produced by Roger Bain, the record had a rough, almost primitive sound, but that added to its sinister charm. Released on February 13, 1970, fittingly on Friday the 13th, if you think about it, Black Sabbath's debut was an instant lightning rod. Critics hated it. Rolling Stone dismissed it as discordant jazz-tinged noise. Others wrote it off as a crude Zeppelin ripoff. But the fans? They knew better. This wasn't music for the critics. This was for the kids who needed something heavier, something darker, more real than anything else out there. In the UK, the album climbed to number 8 on the charts, while in the US, it slowly built a following. It eventually reached number 23 on the Billboard 200 and sold over 1 million copies. Though Black Sabbath was mostly filled with originals, the album's only single was a cover of Crow's Evil Woman. Released in the UK, it flopped, but that hardly mattered. But the music wasn't the only thing that was sinister. The album cover gave everybody the heebie-jeebies, right? Nightmares galore. Though Black Sabbath wasn't the band's commercial breakthrough, that would come soon after with Paranoid, it was the album that laid the foundation for heavy metal as we know it. The atmosphere, the ominous riffing, the bleak storytelling. These elements would define metal for generations. I mean, bands from Metallica to Slayer, Iron Maiden to Pantera, Soundgarden to Nirvana, they all owed a huge debt to Sabbath's pioneering work. Looking back, Black Sabbath is a moment of creation, the big bang of heavy metal. Really, without it, the entire landscape of rock music would look completely different. What started as 4 working-class kids from Birmingham jamming in a tiny studio became the foundation of a genre that would shake the world. I mean, Sabbath had opened the gates of hell, and rock was never the same ever again. All right, let's lighten things up a little bit at our number 3 spot. At number 3, we have an album that, how can I say it, plays like a greatest hits album, even though it was the band's first album. Talking about the Cars with their 1978 debut album, self-titled. You know, by the late 70s, rock was splintering into factions. Punk had shattered the status quo, disco was dominating the charts, and classic rock was fighting to hold its ground, really. But in the middle of all this, a new sound was forming. That blended the raw energy of punk with the catchy hooks of power pop. And at the forefront of this movement was a band called the Cars. Just one of the coolest bands ever. Their sleek, polished sound, equal parts rock and synth-driven new wave, they just stood out from everybody. Now, produced by Roy Thomas Baker, fresh off his work with Queen, the album was recorded in just 12 days at AR Studios in London. Baker's signature layered vocal harmonies and crisp production gave the Cars really a futuristic sheen. Cars, they were made up of 5 musicians from different corners of the scene, all of whom brought something really unique to the table. Rick Ocasek on rhythm guitar and lead vocals was the band's main songwriter and the mastermind. crafting quirky, offbeat lyrics that matched the way he looked. Then bassist Benjamin Orr also sang lead vocals, a smoother, more emotive counterpoint to Ocasek, delivered some of the Cars' biggest hits with just effortless cool. Oh, Benjamin Orr, what a legend.
I guess you're just what I need. Just what I need.
Rounding out the lineup was lead guitarist Elliot Easton, keyboardist Greg Hawkes, and drummer David Robinson, all incredible. Released on June the 6th, 1978, the Cars' debut was an instant revelation. I mean, right from the start, it felt like you were listening to a greatest hits album, like I said. The opening trifecta, Good Times Roll, My Best Friend's Girl, and Just What I Needed, set a bar so high, it felt like they could only go down from there.
You rock and roll, and let the good times roll. Girl, she's my best friend's girl.
But the album just keeps hitting after that. By the time you flip the LP to side 2, forget about it. It's just banger after banger. You're All I've Got Tonight, Bye Bye Love, Moving in Stereo, all mixed up. Just phenomenal songs.
Tonight, you're all I've got tonight, my love. My love. It's all mixed up.
Because the Cars' sophomore LP Candy-O, just a year after their debut came out, only 3 singles were released from the album. That opening trifecta that I mentioned, Just What I Needed, came first. That reached number 27 on the Hot 100. Should have been a number 1. That was followed by My Best Friend's Girl, which climbed to number 35, and finally Good Times Roll settled at number 41. But you know, the truth is, the singles could easily have been double what it was.
So near, I kinda lose my mind, yeah. Here she comes again. When she's dancing beneath the starry sky. You rock and roll, and let the good times roll.
In fact, if you look at the Cars' complete greatest hits from 2002, You're All I've Got Tonight, Bye Bye Love, and Moving in Stereo are all on that album. All 3 would become classic rock radio staples, and it could have been legitimate singles. Who knows what would have happened. Though only reaching number 18 on the album charts, the Cars' debut was a slow burn success, spending an astounding 139 weeks on the Billboard 200. It's nearly 3 years.
Comes again. I kinda like the way it skips.
I mean, in 1978, this band sounded like the future. They still kind of do. They invented the 80s in 1978. I've said that before. Critics were impressed, but unsure where to place the Cars. I mean, they had the art school edge of like Talking Heads, but with far more radio-friendly hooks. They were quirky and stylish and effortlessly cool. And by the end of 1978, Rolling Stone named them Best New Artist of the Year. Back when Rolling Stone was pretty good. They even scored a Grammy nomination for Best New Artist. They should have won. By the time the dust settled, the Cars had sold over 6 million copies and became a cornerstone of the new wave movement. But more importantly, it paved the way for a new era of rock music. You know, one where synths and guitars could coexist, where pop hooks didn't have to be cheesy, and where a band could be futuristic and nostalgic at the very same time. Amen.
You're just what I needed.
Coming to the number 2 spot, man, my number 1 and number 2 could have swapped places on any given day. This is where it shook out for the moment. Man, 1978, what a time for music. And number 2 on the countdown, this one's a game changer, especially the guitarist who the band's named after, or at least him and his brother. Talk about Van Halen's 1978 self-titled debut. '70s were a golden age for rock, for sure, filled with some serious seismic shifts in sound. But few albums shook the foundation of rock like Van Halen's first. I mean, in just 35 minutes, it redefined what hard rock could be, fusing technical wizardry with pure, unfiltered fun. At the heart of it all was Eddie Van Halen, a guitar prodigy who played like he was from another galaxy. His signature two-handed tapping technique showcased on the now legendary Eruption blew minds across the world. People were picking their brains up off the ground. No one had ever heard anything like it. A blistering finger tapping solo that sounded kind of impossible. But that Eddie wasn't just a shredder, he was a songwriter, and his riffs were as melodic as they were powerful. And then there was Diamond Dave, David Lee Roth, the ultimate rock frontman. The frontman who did the splits and gave the ladies the fits. While Eddie was the technical genius, Roth was the charismatic wildman, injecting the band with showmanship and irreverent humor to the max. His voice was brash and over the top, but his playboy personality was perfect for Van Halen and the time. Add in Michael Anthony's booming bass with his heavenly backing vocals. Of course, Alex Van Halen's thunderclap drumming, and this band sounded larger than life itself. Released on February 10th, 1978, Van Halen was recorded in 3 weeks at Sunset Sound in Hollywood. Producer Ted Templeman aimed to capture the band's live energy in this record, and he did just that. Almost everything was recorded in a single take. There were few overdubs, giving the record a real raw, real as hell sound. Templeman, he knew that Eddie was special, so he made sure his guitar was front and center in the mix. I'm so glad. The album opened with Running with the Devil, a slow-building anthem that set the tone for what was to come. Released as the LP's second single, it unfortunately topped out at number 84 on the Hot 100. However, its ominous droning bass intro, Roth's howling vocals, and Eddie Van Halen's piercing riffs made it a defining track of the era. The aforementioned Eruption came next, an instrumental explosion coming in just under 2 minutes. And from there, the album just keeps delivering hit after hit, split after split. Their high-octane cover of The Kinks' You Really Got Me became their first hit. It reached number 36 on the Hot 100. It was louder, faster, and heavier than the original, for sure, powered by Eddie's scorching solos and Roth's playful, sneering vocals. There was Ain't Talk About Love, a song that Eddie thought was too simple, but it became one of the most iconic guitar riffs in history. He actually wrote this song as a parody on punk rock. Eddie making fun of punk rock, what else could you want? And somehow it ended up as one of the heaviest riffs ever recorded. Though it was never officially released as a single in the US, Ain't Talking About Love became a rock radio staple alongside other album highlights like Atomic Punk and Ice Cream Man, of course. The album's final single, Jamie's Crying, failed to chart, but a decade later it would reach number 2 as the foundation of Tone Loc's Wild Thing. Talked about that about 6 months ago. That sampled the track. Tone Loc made millions, while Van Halen made zilch, not much at all. Every track on this album, it's another level. We ain't talking about filler here, just hit after hit. It's a testament to how tight and refined Van Halen had become from the years playing the LA club scene. Now, commercially, Van Halen was an instant success. It peaked at number 19 on the Billboard 200. In a year, it went platinum, and it sold 12 million copies today. More than the sales, though, Van Halen was a cultural shift. It signaled the arrival of a new era of rock. The album's mix of precision and party vibes set the template for the entire glam metal movement of the 80s. Without Van Halen, there's just no Motley Crue, there's no Guns N' Roses, there's no Sunset Strip. Eddie Van Halen became the most influential guitarist ever, inspiring countless musicians to pick up the instrument and try to figure out how to, have some of that magic. I mean, everybody knows who Eddie Van Halen is. Even if you don't like rock and roll, if you don't like music or popular music, everybody knows. Even kids. I go and speak at high schools. I do assemblies. And every time I've ever done one, I've asked kids, you know who Eddie Van Halen is? Everybody knows who he is. Coming in at the number 1 spot, tough between number 1 and number 2, but I got the band and the album that saved rock in the 70s, right smack dab in the middle of disco. I never get tired of talking about it. I got Boston with their self-titled debut, a perfect debut. I've mentioned it numerous times, but Boston really was a rock and roll saving phenomenon. Few bands in history have had the kind of impact that Boston's debut had when it was released in August of '76. It became the fastest selling first album of all time, setting the stage for arena rock's dominance in the late 70s and early 80s. But you know what makes this record so special is that it wasn't crafted in a high-end studio with a team of producers and engineers. Rather, it was largely recorded in Tom Scholz's basement, the work of a brilliant engineer turned musician who was determined to perfect every note before the world ever heard it. This was the biggest selling debut album of all time until Guns N' Roses overtook it a few years back. Tom Scholz was a multi-instrumentalist and was at the heart of Boston. An MIT grad and a Polaroid engineer who applied scientific precision to rock. While working his day job, he spent years painstakingly developing songs in his home studio. Tom was obsessed with crafting the perfect rock record, and that dedication is what made Boston sound unlike anything else. The LP bridged the gap between prog rock's complexities and pop's accessibility, blending searing guitar harmonies and airtight production. Despite Scholz's technical prowess, the album wouldn't have worked without the voice to match it, though. That's where the great Brad Delp came in. Delp had one of the most powerful dynamic voices in rock history. His ability to effortlessly transition from rich, smooth tones to piercing high falsettos really gave Boston its soul, perfectly complementing Scholz's precision, engineered sound. Rounding out the band were Barry Goodrow on guitar, Fran Sheehan on bass, and Sib Hashian on drums, although Scholz played most of the instrumental parts himself in the studio. The album opens with More Than a Feeling, a song that's perfect. Instantly became one of the greatest rock anthems of all time when it was released to radio. I mean, it was a blueprint for everything that followed in arena rock. With Scholz's shimmering acoustic intro, Delp's escalating vocals, and a massive anthemic chorus, More Than a Feeling defined the era. Released as the lead single, it climbed to number 5 in the Hot 100, propelling the band to overnight superstardom and kicking disco in the ass. But Boston was no one-hit album. The second single, Peace of Mind, that brought another infectious, uplifting melody reaching number 38 on the Billboard charts. And of course, there's Foreplay Long Time, which showcased Scholz's prog rock influences, starting with an epic instrumental intro before launching into a tight radio-friendly rocker. That one peaked at number 22, but like every track on the album, it became a classic rock phenomenon. It's been such a long time. Even the deep cuts on Boston are legendary. Smokin', a high-energy blues-infused rocker that became a live favorite, and then Rock and Roll Band told the fictionalized story of the band's rise to fame. Rounding it out, you've also got Hitch a Ride, Something About You, Let Me Take You Home Tonight. Oh my gosh, what a song. I mean, when Boston dropped in August of '76, no one could have predicted its explosive success. I mean, the album peaked at number 3 on the Billboard 200, but more importantly, it stayed on the charts for 132 weeks, sold over 1 million copies in its first 3 months alone. Eventually, it was certified 17 times platinum, making it one of the best-selling debut albums in history. It was number 1 for a while, like I said. Its influence is massive. Boston's polished, guitar-driven rock became the template for bands like Foreigner and Journey and Survivor. It also helped usher in the rock era of corporate rock, where major labels sought to replicate the formula of perfectly engineered arena-ready rock records. From the band, The Saved Rock, who is not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And it boggles the mind, I know, but more than 4 decades later, Boston remains one of the most beloved and enduring albums in rock history. It's a perfect record. From that first shimmering chord to More Than a Feeling to the final notes of Let Me Take You Home Tonight, it's an album that will never grow old. Perfection. Those are my picks. That's my top 5 debut albums of the 70s. What do you think? What are your top 5 debut albums of the 70s? What are your memories of these bands, of these songs? These are perfect albums, especially the top 3. I mean, it doesn't get better than that. If you like our content, we invite you to subscribe below. Let's have a great discussion below, celebrating the 70s and the greatness of these bands. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.